Today we're going to build a bed out of 2x12s and some reused IKEA hardware. The 2x12s I got at the lumber yard had already been cut down to rough length, so we started by just planing them down to get a smoother finish. We then ripped off the first edge to square up the board, and began ripping each board down to width. This is a fairly simple design, so you don't have to make too many cuts. I'll attach the SketchUp file in the description down below. The headboard is made out of 3 boards glued together. We found a layout that looked best, then marked where the dowels were going to go. I used my doweling jig, which I got for about $10 on Amazon. You just set the width of the board, line it up with your mark, and drill a hole to the depth of your dowel. After doing a dry fit to make sure everything lined up, we glued and clamped the first 2 boards together. Once they were dry, we came back and glued on the 3rd board. While the headboard dried, we cut everything down to length. As you can see here, the bed's really only made of 6 different lengths of boards. If you're enjoying this video, why not hit the subscribe button so you can keep up to date with my new videos. Also, give me a thumbs up so I know what kind of things you'll like and I'll make more of that. After the headboard dried, we cut it down to length with a straight edge. Unfortunately, we had to cut it down again since the aluminum edge we first used was not straight. We used a router to create tongues on the sides of the headboard where they would connect to the vertical posts. Then we used a table saw to cut grooves in the posts. We had to do a few plunge cuts so that the cut would not go all the way to the bottom where we didn't really need it. As you're expanding the groove, just go slow and make sure that you don't cut away too much. You want a snug fit, but not too tight. We used a chisel to remove the remaining bits of wood from the groove. Then we glued up the tongue and groove and slowly hammered the posts onto the sides of the headboard. I used pocket holes for almost all the other joints. This Craig jig I used is only like $40 and it's really easy to use. You just set the width of the board, set the drill depth, and clamp the jig to the board. I probably didn't need to use this many pocket holes, but I wanted to make sure that the bed was super sturdy. I glued and attached the foot posts to the footboard. I forgot to film me attaching this little sideboard support, but I just glued and then nailed it in. You could also just use some clamps if you'd prefer. I drilled a few more pocket holes in the sideboards. Then we gave everything a good sand down to 220 grit, and I used a router to give all the corners a slight bevel. Since this is soft pine, I used a pre-stain treatment which helps to reduce the splotching with the stain. You just put it on first, let it dry for a little bit, and then put on the stain afterwards. For the stain, I used a Varathane golden oak finish. After it dried, I applied 3 coats of polyurethane using my new finish sprayer. It went much faster than applying by hand. Because the wood I used was not completely dried, and I had been working outside in the heat and humidity, the headboard shrank considerably. This is actually the second time it happened. I had to cut it down and re-bevel it. I would probably go with something drier and work inside if I did this again. I used a little wood putty to fill the gap where the tongue met the groove. This is actually my second mistake. Even though I designed everything correctly, I somehow did not follow my plans. The headboard sat about 8 inches too high, so I was not going to be able to attach the middle slat support to it. So I cut down and finished another piece and then used pocket holes to attach it to the existing headboard. This isn't perfect and it doesn't look great, but you won't see it once it's finished anyway. In an effort to reduce waste, I decided to reuse the hardware and slats from an old IKEA bed. I started by removing all the hardware and then attached it to the new bed. This involved measuring out where the screws go, drilling pilot holes, and installing the screws. This is essentially the same process for all of the hardware. It actually worked out really well. I used a guide to help keep the two boards in place while I attached the sideboards. I didn't use any glue so that I can take it apart and move it if I need to. After putting the slats back on, I was pretty much done. I think it turned out really great considering some of the mistakes I'd made. This bed is really sturdy and I like the clean, simple look of it. However, if I did it again, I think I'd probably use a nicer hardwood just so it has a more polished finish. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Also, I'll post a couple of other builds I've done and I'd love your feedback on those. Thanks.